What if doing less could make you feel calmer and help you accomplish more? Well, let's see why setting just 3 daily priorities might be your key to sanity. Welcome to Focus on This, the most productive podcast on the internet. I'm Marissa Hyatt.
And I'm Joel Miller.
This is where we remind you of something that you already know. It's not about getting more things done, it's about getting the right things done.
Both in work and in life. And today we're unpacking the magic of the daily big three and why narrowing your focus can actually expand your results.
This is one of my favorite topics because I hear constantly from friends and acquaintances that there's always more to do. And honestly, from our double win coaching clients, I think this is one of the biggest sticking points for them
hmm
is there's always more to do and accomplish in one day than we even have time or attention to be able to accomplish, which feels like a really impossible choice every single day. We're asking the question, what can I feasibly get done today? And we feel that constant pressure to do more than we actually have the ability to do.
Totally. My mind always goes to that line from The Lord of the Rings where Bilbo Baggins says that he feels like butter scraped over too much bread. It's just like, there's just not enough of me to go around. I mean, that's true for I think all of us. We all have this tendency to be very ambitious, and in that ambition, we bite off more than we can chew. And I think that's pretty normal. On top of that, when you are, somebody that gets a lot of stuff done, people give you more stuff to get done.
Yeah.
So like they just assume you have the capacity, and until you squeak and say no, like you can't handle it anymore, they're going to keep giving you stuff. So whether it's self-imposed or other imposed, we tend to just accumulate too much to do.
Yeah, especially if you're a high achiever, which we know that's our community. These are the people that we tend to hang out with, Joel,
Right.
here, especially on the podcast, are people who are going to be accomplishing a lot day to day. And like you're talking about, it can feel like this constant struggle where it's, you want to cram in more because you're able to, you're a high capacity person, you can do a lot of things. And yet there comes a point where it's just not serving you or the outcomes you're trying to accomplish and can feel actually really exhausting and discouraging at the end of the day when you just have this whole planner full of days or notebook full of days
Oh yeah.
where you have barely any check marks. It feels discouraging, it feels frustrating, and you feel like you're constantly asking, am I making any progress?
Yeah, totally. Let's quantify this for a second. I have a pop quiz for you. I don't
Okay.
know if you're ready for this.
I don't know if I
Nobody's ready
am.
for a pop quiz. That's why it's a pop quiz.
Great.
This is according to one survey I just read. 60% of respondents said they have more than how many personal and work related tasks every week? How many does this percentage, 60% of people, have on their list every week?
Well, according to the people that I'm talking to, it's gotta be in the double digits.
hmm
I would say 50.
Turns out the number is 60. So you were close, but it's
Okay.
even worse than you imagined, worse than you feared.
Wow.
And that's not the end of it. That was 60% of the audience. Another 15% have actually more than 100.
Oh my gosh.
If you were to break those two numbers down for, over the course of a day, 60 personal and work related tasks every week is like 12 every day. And if you're talking about 100, that's 20, or more than 100, that's more than 20.
Wow.
So that's so many.
One of the things that I hear or questions that I get is from our customers that I see in our full focus planner community or just online is we need more lines for our task list. We need more ability to
Yes.
put more tasks down. And this is really intentional on our part, Joel. We have intentionally designed the full focus planner to not just have an endless amount of lines for you to add an endless amount of tasks every single day because we know you are not going to be able to accomplish them. It's a recipe for disaster. And this goes to prove it. There's always more to do. There's never going
Totally.
to be enough lines. Am the kind of person, and I've heard a lot of our community does this too, where you kind of have a continual task list of things you're kind of putting off or thinking about in their
Right.
phones, right? And so you have this note in your phone with all these tasks. And I know that when I talk to people, especially when they're new into our world, that list is so long and they always ask the question, how do I translate this into my planner?
Yeah.
How do I take all of these 100 things that I'm supposed to be getting done this week and translate them? And really, the answer is not to just directly translate those. We want to be mindful and thoughtful about those. But this just goes to show there's never going to be enough time, never enough lines in your planner, never enough energy, never enough focus to get all the things done that we're trying to accomplish. But that doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your results by any means.
No. Just to go ahead and underscore the pain here for a minute, just like press into the bruise a tiny
Right.
bit. A LinkedIn survey found that only 11% of workers actually finish their to-do list each day.
Oh my gosh.
And this is kind of a famous study done by the I Done This company, but their analysis showed that 41% of to-dos are never done. Like, as in,
Yeah.
we write them down, that big list, like we write it down and it just goes there to die. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't actually ever
It's a
happen.
graveyard of tasks. It's really not surprising to me, at all that this would be true. This feels intuitively true to me that based
Yep,
on a lot of conversations, based on the things that we know, our community struggles with. And, if we think about our community is full of high achieving professionals, that's what we know. These are people who have a lot to get done. And we're not just talking about work. I think that's important to kind of underscore here that
totally.
your life is full of a lot of things beyond just work. And so while we're, going to focus on work and talk about that, this doesn't just mean we're talking about work task. This could mean anything related to your personal life is also going on this list. And that feels very daunting and very overwhelming and just hit the brakes before you even hit the gas because how are you even going to get it done?
Well, the what I'm even hearing in your voice is echoed in another number.
Okay, we're just digging it deeper.
So 90% of respondents to the first survey I mentioned, 90% of respondents said this kind of overcommitment that they had leaves them feeling either moderately, highly, or very highly stressed.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're just walking around with like a tornado in our backpack trying to like figure out how to get it all quelled down, and we can't. There's just too much to manage, and all of that too muchness is like cognitively, emotionally, psychologically, it's just it's a burden.
Yeah. Wow, that's really sobering to think about that our task list is creating massive amounts of stress and we actually have control over this, which is hopeful and
Yes.
encouraging that it doesn't have to stay this way where we look at this list whether that's a note on your phone or in your planner or on a legal pad and you look at that and you immediately feel somewhere between moderately to very highly stressed. Your blood pressure is raising
Right.
just by looking at the amount of things that you're supposed to
Your
try to
Apple
do.
Watch is sending you alerts,
Yes,
like your heart rate is
pay
problematic.
attention, things are out of the norm here, and, I think it's really sobering to realize there is, always gonna be more to do. Not everything has to be done today, and we've got to get our understanding of what's reasonable and what's feasible, um, right-sized because we
Totally.
clearly are living in some kind of a, I don't know what, delusional planet thinking that we can accomplish 100 things in any given week, which is wild.
Right.
And
I
then,
mean,
you know,
ludicrous.
41% of those things are sitting there never gonna get done in the first
Yeah.
place.
Ever, ever, ever.
Ooh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
really, really sobering.
Well, okay, so let's actually think about this for a second. If a bunch of that stuff is never going to get done, and you might as well acknowledge that on the front end. As you're thinking about transferring your list, let's just say that that's an exercise you could do in order to do this thing that I'm getting ready to mention. Shouldn't you go ahead and apply some like critical thinking to what you might actually accomplish, what really needs to be done, what
Right.
doesn't need to be done, and actually start like editing that list?
Yeah. There's gotta be a priority to these things. All tasks are not created equal. There are certain things that you can intentionally push out that you don't need to have that constantly sitting there asking for your mental attention when it actually doesn't have to happen right now. Joel, before we started this episode, I was actually setting my daily big three,
Mhm.
and I was referring back to yesterday and what I did or didn't do. Yesterday was a really busy day. I was in meetings most of the day, and I fell prey to exactly what we're talking about. I added way too many things to my list trying to get those done. Um, and when I look back, it's like, of course, there was literally not enough time on my calendar, like empty space for me to even execute these things. I don't know what I was thinking here.
Right.
But if I had just in that moment said, hey, these actually aren't critical to get done today. I can get these done later this week or even honestly next week. I think I would have felt much less stressed throughout the day.
Yeah. I think there's a part of us that we feel the stress of all this stuff that we know needs to get done,
Yeah.
and there is a like a reset on the stress level when you just get it written down.
Yeah.
Like, you feel better the minute you make a list, because the minute you make a list, it feels like, all right, it's all contained.
Yeah.
At least I know what it is. I've got some boundaries on this thing. But if that list somehow is communicating to you and you need to get this all done today, then you've just ramped up the stress again, because
Yeah.
there's no way to get it all done.
So we've got to make sure that we're understanding what really is happening. I had a conversation with one of our team members yesterday for our one on one meeting that we have on a regular basis. And he was talking about how this time of year tends to be higher stress. There's more things going on for most of us. There's just a lot to do.
Tease. We have an episode coming up on that very topic.
We do. We actually are going to talk about this more in depth because it's so important. But his goal over the next 90 days is to figure out how to do what he needs to do for his job while maintaining a high level of peace.
Well, I actually think of the goal setting framework called an OKR,
Yeah,
like an objective with a key result. And if you have this objective and one of your key results is peace, like, that's a great way of thinking about what he's doing there. He's saying, I'll only consider this a success if I'm also having peace while I'm achieving this goal.
totally. Well, and I think that we put so much unnecessary pressure on ourselves to accomplish everything we're trying to do. We feel like we have this high sense of urgency that everything is supposed to get done right now, today, or this week. And we're so unreasonable in looking at our calendars and going, this is what can actually be done. And what I told him yesterday, and I think is helpful for all of us to hear, is that for most of us, not doing that one thing, whether it's responding to that email or, finishing that content, um, you know, making that phone call, whatever it may be, is not so consequential that somebody is going to bleed out on the table.
Right. Yeah. This is not surgery.
This is
This
not
is,
surgery for most of
yeah.
us. I mean, unless you're a surgeon, like this
Right.
is not the reality for the majority of us. And I think it's helpful because I think that we feel that way and we usually feel like the person who would bleed out on the table is us.
Yeah. Wow. Like, it's existentially risky not to do these things.
Yes. And I think that what I would would be willing to say is often what ends up happening is the very thing we're trying to avoid. We set ourselves up for total failure. We add all, 160 to 100 tasks on our list in any given week, expecting that we're going to do that. And what ends up happening is we end up bleeding out on the table trying. And the truth is, we don't need to do that. We don't have to compromise on the results
Right.
in any way, shape, or form. This doesn't mean that we're just saying, okay, well, we're going to settle for less and, we're going to do kind of just the bare minimum here. That's not at all what we're saying. We're saying you can still get the results that you're after and also maintain a healthy dose of peace at the same time.
Yeah. Let's pivot and chat a little bit about why, like, this even makes sense,
Yeah,
because it's somewhat counterintuitive. We think, I have to get done all this stuff, and we're saying, A, you can't.
right.
B, no, you don't. And it's the no, you don't part where people are like gonna immediately react. They're gonna be like, what do you mean I don't have to do all this stuff? Of course I have to do all this stuff. But we know that that's not true. And there's actually some rather interesting research, and there's some interesting historical anecdotes and others that kind of help us understand why. The one that I've been thinking about recently is the story of Ivy Lee, who went to Charles Schwab and said, "Hey, I can save you gobs of money in your business." And Schwab was like, "Okay, tell me more." And he said, basically, "I just want to work with your executives. And, if at the end of this period, of this experimental period, you like the results, then feel free to write me a big check. But otherwise, this is like purely speculation or purely speculative on my part." And Schwab was like, "Great." So he goes to work with these executives, and basically the plan was this: every day he had them write down 6 things that they were going to accomplish, no more than 6. They would do it at the end of the prior day. And so the next day they would start on those 6 things, and they would like monotask. They would just do one at a time. And whatever was left over would get punted to the next day, where they could only then add whatever the number was up to 6. And the end result was that at the end of this period, this was so successful in terms of keeping these executives focused and keeping them productive that Schwab wrote this guy a check for the equivalent in today's dollars of like $400,000.
Wow.
So hugely beneficial to take these guys that are busy doing all this stuff and say, no, 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 let's just narrow it down. And not only will you narrow it down, you're going to be ruthlessly committed to finishing this list. And whatever you do, you're going to stay single-minded on the task too. You're not going to
Mhm.
bounce between tasks.
Yeah,
Because what we know is what's happening with these big lists is we're not just doing one thing at a time. We're bouncing all over the place, which just
totally.
means we have divided focus. And so Ivy Lee helped get these guys like narrowed down to just doing one thing at a time, and then also keeping their focus really tight. What we've decided at Full Focus is like you can tighten it even more,
Right.
and that is 3 things. But that's like the root of where that's coming from, is this idea that your focus is everywhere, and if it's everywhere, you're never going to be able to accomplish the things that you want to get done.
Totally. Well, and I think that what ends up happening often for most of us is we look at that list and we feel an immediate sense of overwhelm.
We're just
Yeah,
defeated.
this decision fatigue. It's like
Yeah,
I don't know where to start. And it feels overwhelming, it feels exhausting. We end up over time, the more decisions that we're constantly having to make, the worse that it gets for us. And so if we're able to keep those decisions to a really small number, 3, like, okay, at the beginning of my day, I just set the 3 things that I'm looking for. I don't have to worry about decision fatigue
right,
setting in. I don't have to continue asking myself what next all day long.
right,
It's like, I know the next thing that I do after this is this next thing, because I've got it written in a plan. And I think that the more that we can reduce that decision fatigue, the more we can reduce the mental overwhelm that ends up happening as we're trying to process and trying to figure out. And then if we're able to do that, that's going to help motivation, help our momentum sustain as we continue knocking those 3 things off the list.
totally. Well, if you go back to that statistic of 90% of respondents saying that their sense of overcommitment leaves them feeling stressed, that's where a lot of it's coming from.
Right.
It's just like you can't get it all done, and it's staring back at you the whole time you look at that list. It's like everything on that list is saying you'll never finish me,
Yeah.
And of course you feel stressed. But the minute you start weeding it out and you start narrowing it down, all of a sudden you're able to look at 3 things on your list today and say, yeah, I can do that, and I can do that, and I can do that. And every one of them is high leverage.
Yes.
Every one of them matters. Every one of them will move the ball down the field for you.
Yeah, so if you're listening and you're feeling what we're talking about, this high level of overwhelm where you feel stressed, you think about what you have to do, your heart rate goes up, it just feels like you don't know where to start, what to do first, how to prioritize. My encouragement is slow down, take a deep breath, do what Joel is talking about, just brain dump what you need to brain dump out. And then we're going to walk you through how to really implement the daily big 3 into your day-to-day life. And through that process, you're going to find an immense amount of peace. This really is the path to peace. I cannot even stress that enough. What we're talking about that most people experience is the exact opposite of that. And we've got a really, really simple solution that anybody at any level can immediately today go implement. So, Joel, let's talk about what this specifically looks like. How do we take this crazy to do list and turn it into a daily big three?
Okay. I would look at the big list and I would just say, like, what do I need to do in order to move my goals forward, for instance? You can think about your personal goals. You could definitely think about your professional goals. What do I need to do today to move those forward?
Mhm.
Then you also want to ask, like, what is it on that list that depends mostly on me? So if it's the kind of thing that, like, I'm going to be contributing 10% to, it may not need to live on my list in the same way as something that I'm contributing 90% to.
Right.
So if it's mostly on me, then I need to take like as much responsibility for that as I possibly can and just like get it done. And so that should be a candidate also. And then it also has to be something that can fit realistically within your time and your energy limits.
Yes.
There are 168 hours in a week, and you're going to be sleeping for a bunch of them, hopefully.
Yeah.
You're going to be hanging out with friends and family. You're going to be doing all kinds of other things. You only have so many hours in a week to work. And I know that we think that we can do way more than we actually can fit into the hours, or even way more than we can fit into our energy balance.
Right.
Like, let's say you hit the day running, but by 2 p.m. you're lagging. Well, there's a reason. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's going to be lagging around 2 p.m.
Right.
and you probably need to like do some low leverage work there, not assume that you can knock out yet another major important project,
Yeah.
because it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I think one thing to add to this, as you're thinking through your list and what to pick for today, look at your calendar. I
Oh
know
yeah.
this is simple, but like I did this yesterday where I didn't do that. And the three things that I had, one of them was literally not going to get done purely because there was no space in my day to do the thing. And had I looked at my calendar and really asked the question, is it possible for me to accomplish this based on what else is already on my calendar? I would
Yeah.
have not put that thing on my daily big three.
Yeah.
But I made the mistake. We're not immune, even us here at Full Focus, we're not immune to this. It's still a challenge that we're working through each day. And when we forget to ask that question, this is where I see most people go wrong. They don't look at their list. They just purely think, okay, I need to get these things done today. And they're not considering what's already on their calendar, what other commitments they have. And there's just literally no way that they could have accomplished those things.
Yeah.
So really ask this question on the front end as you're filtering, as you're making the decisions of which of the three things do I want to add. And if you have a day that is full of meetings or full of things that you're having to attend, maybe those need to be part of your big three. Those items may be important enough to put as part of your daily big three. For instance, Joel, I think you and I both have this podcast recording as one of our daily big threes.
It's my number one.
Yeah, same.
And since today, like, this is going to take a big hunk of the day, I only have a big two today
Yeah.
because I know that there's really only time in the workday after this recording to accomplish one other thing.
And honestly, energy. I mean, the truth is, this kind of work, if you're in a presenting mode, takes a different level of energy than if you're just sitting by yourself writing or something, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're doing, like for me, I do a lot of reviews of the team's work. So I'm reviewing emails, sales page copy, design, you name it. That takes a really different level of my energy than
Yeah.
doing this type of work does. And so I need to account for that energy output when I think about the rest of the time today and what I'm feasibly able to accomplish. I want to make sure I'm not only accounting for anything else that's on my calendar, but also my energy. And so I know if we're spending 3 hours in a podcast recording today, which I think is what we've got scheduled,
Yeah.
that my energy output for the next half of the day is going to be probably far less than on a normal, Tuesday.
If there were a personal trainer here right now overlooking this moment, they would be like, that's it. We want you to leave it all, all on the
Right.
field, give it all.
Yeah.
But that means whatever it is you're doing, if you do have a moment like that in your workday, well, you are going to be drained. You're not going to be
Yeah.
able to do other things at the same level.
Exactly.
I want to like stand in the position of the listener for a second and just ask a question, because this
Yes.
is a question that we often hear, and I can just hear people asking it. And so I'm just going to go ahead and ask it for them. And listener, you're welcome. Okay. So the question is this: how do I pick three things when everything feels urgent?
Mm, yeah. How many times have we asked ourselves this question too? I think this is
Totally.
so common because you're right. Everything does feel urgent. It's what I was talking about, that we have this fear that if we don't do this thing, somebody's going to bleed out on the table. So, first of all, let's take that option off of the table literally, because we know that
Mostly nobody's gonna be dying.
mostly nobody is going to be dying. So
Yep.
let's kind of right size the risk factor here if we don't do something. Um, a couple of things that I usually coach our clients to. First of all, really asking the question: does this have to get done today? Like, is this mission critical today? And you can ask this a little bit differently to say, is somebody waiting on me for this
Mhm.
today? That's usually how I know, is it really urgent, that if I don't do this, somebody's going to come knocking on my door and saying, "Hey, did you finish that thing? Or did you get
Yep.
that done?" Right? And if the answer is no, nobody's going to come to me. Like, I still have a couple of days or even a week until that person who's waiting on me is going to come knocking on my door, then I'm not going to probably add that to my daily big 3 today.
You can safely defer it.
Yes, if I have other urgent items that I know people are gonna come knocking on my door. So that's kind of my first filter, is usually figuring out, will anybody notice if I don't do this
Mhm.
today? And when I look at my daily big 3, every single one of those things, yes, somebody's gonna notice if I don't do those things. So I've gotta
Yep.
get those done today. Secondly, I think this is where we can look at our weekly big 3 to specifically figure out, is this critical for me to do now to make progress on that weekly big 3? So Joel, do you want to kind of distinguish the difference between a weekly big 3 and a daily big 3 for everybody who's listening, to make sure they understand how these things relate and how they're different?
The easiest way to imagine this is to say, really, to look at actually another big three on top of the weekly,
Mhm.
and that is the quarterly. So let's say that there are several goals that you're working to accomplish over the course of a quarter. We would say ideally no more than three, and truthfully, it would be even preferable if you did fewer, for the sake of focus. But let's say you have three. The only way those three goals are actually going to get accomplished over the course of that quarter is if you make effort towards them.
Right.
If you like do things to make them happen. And that means you have to like get it written down. And that is what your weekly big three is for. So basically, your weekly big three is a way for you to say, all right, what is it that I really want to get done in my life? And I'm taking a stand for this thing, whatever this thing happens to be, this goal. And I'm going to make sure that I'm making progress on it every week. And
Mhm.
so I'm writing one step I might take towards that goal as one of my weekly big three. It becomes a priority.
Yeah.
Now, there's other things in my life that also matter. Like there's stuff that I want to get done, but there's stuff everyone else wants me to get done, especially, my workplace. And so I've got work stuff that might also need to go on to that weekly big three. So what I'm trying to do is ultimately say, I'm going to track three very high level priorities over the course of this week. They're going to be a mix of personal and professional. And in that mix of personal and professional, I'm going to have stuff I have to do every day in order to accomplish that. Or I'm going to have to fit it in over the course of these 5 available work days to get it done. And so those become your daily big three. So that's kind of the relationship between a quarterly big three, a weekly big three, and a daily big three. You've
Yeah.
got like your long term target, you've got these kind of short term, the short term priorities where you're saying, I'm going to make progress on this part of this thing this week, this way. And then there's the stuff that you do every day in order to get that done.
Right. Well, and I think a really simple way to filter and to figure out if things should really be on your daily big 3 is to ask the question, if nothing else got accomplished today, what are
Mm,
the 3
great
most
question.
important things that I need to do today to
Yeah, that's so good.
make progress on my weekly big 3 or my quarterly big 3 or my other, big priorities in my life right now? And I feel like that really helps us to determine what's the most important thing, because if we go in with the end in mind that we know we can't do everything, then that's just going to immediately take things off the table. And so knowing that on the front end is helpful, because then we can ask the question, well, then with that in mind, what are the
Mhm.
3 most important things? If nothing else got done today, what are the 3 most important things? And usually that's a pretty good filter. And then obviously, we do have space in our full focus planner for you to put other tasks. And so those
Yeah.
are the things that you want to get to later or after you've accomplished your big three as time allows, or that's usually those other tasks are usually very small, little quick things like, hey, I need to text this person and remind them that, or I need to deliver this document to so and so, or whatever. But it's not necessarily rising to that level of a daily big three.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as you're going through and filtering your task list into your daily big three each day. We want to make sure we're connecting it back to those weekly priorities and then back to your quarterly goals. That's
Yeah.
that's the aim, is that these things are connecting back. And my last tip is just to make sure that you're accounting for your entire life. So making sure that you're thinking about your personal life too. It's easy to default only to work in this context. And sometimes there's personal tasks that have to get done, and they're sometimes so important that they need to rise to that daily big three or weekly big three as well.
Yeah. We have in every episode a tool or a tip of the week. What I'm suggesting is definitely our tool and tip of the week is it's the big three. It's the daily big three. This is the thing that's going to help you through it. And just to kind of formalize what I'm hearing you say, what we've said in terms of the process, basically, you're going to review your quarterly big three. You're going to review your weekly big three. You're going to review your calendar. And based on those three reviews, you're going to pick three things that day that
Yes,
you're going to accomplish.
that's it.
Easy peasy.
So go do this as soon as you finish this episode. Hopefully, you're listening to this on Monday morning. Hopefully, you've done your weekly preview. You've got that weekly big three identified. So, immediately after this, if you haven't already, stop what you're doing and go set your daily big three for today. If nothing else got done today, what are the three most important things that you must get done by the end of today?
And then what do you do with the rest of your list? Just roll it up and smoke it or throw it
Yeah.
away or what?
Yeah, that's probably pretty good. Yeah. No, we'll talk about that in another episode of really what to do with all the other things on your list. But if you are able to master this practice every single day, you're gonna little by little whittle away at that list.
Yeah,
And
I
for all
love
the
that.
other things that are just not gonna get done, we'll talk about how to handle those in a future episode.
What I really love about this is solving for peace in the season. When you look back at those surveys, the level of stress, this is one of those things that will help reduce that stress.
Mhm.
So you are solving for peace even while you're being hyper productive.
100%. Absolutely.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just think the biggest thing to walk away with is understanding that finishing strong, when we think about this year, when we think about where we're at, these projects we're working on, these goals we're working on, finishing strong comes from focusing small. So, as we think about our lives and our days, three priorities every single day can literally transform everything. It truly is simple. It seems almost too simple, but trust us, we have done the research. We have seen with hundreds of thousands of our customers that this works. And we can personally say from our own lives, this works. So go ahead, stop what you're doing after this episode, and go set your daily big three. Trust me, it will make a massive difference in your day.
Thanks for joining us on Focus on This.
This is the most productive podcast on the internet. So please stop what you're doing. If you found this episode helpful, go ahead, text it to one of your friends or one of your colleagues, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen or at focusonthispodcast.com.
We'll be here next week where we're going to talk about protecting your priorities before the holidays hit. Until then,
Stay focused.
oops, I did that wrong.
I think we should keep it. The oops at the end is good.
Okay.